They thought they got away with it. They got too comfortable in the dark. That was the real mistake. Not simply that they lied. Not simply that they betrayed you. Not simply that they smiled while carrying poison in their hearts. The deeper problem was that they kept doing it long enough to believe nothing would ever come back on them. They watched you stay quiet. They watched you carry humiliation without making a scene. They watched you absorb disrespect without turning into the kind of person they were trying to make you become. And because you did not explode, because you did not chase them down, because you did not spend your days trying to prove every little thing they had done, they convinced themselves they had won. But silence was never their victory. Silence was your discipline. You were not weak. You were being held back by wisdom. You knew if you opened your mouth from a wounded place, you might say things your spirit would regret later. You knew revenge could make you look just as dirty as the people who wronged you. So you carried the pain to God instead of throwing it into the streets. And heaven saw that. God saw the conversations you never heard. He saw the private laughter. He saw the jealousy dressed up as concern. He saw the people who pretended to support you while secretly hoping your life would fall apart. Every hidden motive was exposed before him, long before it was exposed before people. Now the ground underneath them is shifting. The comfort they once enjoyed is turning into pressure. The confidence they wore like armor is starting to crack. Peace is leaving their mind in ways they cannot explain. They may still be pretending in public, but privately, something has started tormenting them. Because God does not need noise to begin judgment. He can start with restlessness. He can start with fear. He can start by letting people sit inside the weight of what they did. And this is only the beginning, because now God is reviewing everything. 1. God started reviewing everything. A terrifying realization begins settling over people when they understand God never missed a single detail. Not one lie, not one act of manipulation, not one moment they sat comfortably while somebody else cried because of what they had done. For a long time, these individuals moved through life, believing appearances were enough. As long as they looked respectable in public, they assumed heaven would overlook what was happening in private. They built entire identities around performance, church smiles, fake concern, carefully crafted stories designed to make themselves look innocent while quietly destroying somebody else's peace behind closed doors. But God examines places people cannot hide. He examines motives, and many of the people who wounded you never expected their motives to be brought into judgment. They thought only visible actions mattered. They never imagined heaven was recording the jealousy behind the compliments, the hatred behind the gossip, the satisfaction they felt watching you struggle emotionally. Everything was being reviewed. Every time they tried to isolate you, every time they mocked your calling, every time they twisted the truth to protect themselves, every private conversation meant to damage your reputation, recorded. Meanwhile, you were being shaped in the fire they created around you. While they were busy studying ways to break your spirit, God was studying your endurance. Heaven watched you fight the temptation to become bitter, watched you wrestle with heartbreak without turning cruel, watched you continue walking forward even while carrying emotional exhaustion most people around you never noticed. Some nights you probably questioned whether God saw any of it at all, because silence can feel confusing when you are suffering unfairly. There are seasons where evil seems comfortable, seasons where deceptive people appear to prosper, while good-hearted people sit alone trying to understand why they became targets in the first place. Those moments test faith deeply. They force a person to decide whether they still trust God when justice feels delayed. But delayed does not mean denied. Now the pressure has shifted. The same people who once felt calm while hurting you are beginning to feel something heavy settling over their lives. Peace is leaving them. Rest is disappearing. Situations they thought were buried are slowly resurfacing. Some are becoming emotionally unstable because guilt has a way of poisoning the mind once God removes the illusion of control. And the most frightening part for them is this: they can feel something changing, but they cannot stop it, because heaven has already opened the record of everything they did. And the narcissist who once believed they were untouchable is about to learn what happens when consequences finally arrive. 2. The narcissist never expected consequences. The narcissist became far too comfortable living without accountability. Somewhere along the way, they convinced themselves they were smarter than consequences, smarter than truth, smarter than the damage they were causing. They learned how to manipulate emotions, distort stories, and maintain control over people who were too exhausted to keep defending themselves. After doing it long enough, they stopped feeling nervous about it. Manipulation became natural, lying became easy, mocking people behind closed doors became entertainment. One of the darkest realities about narcissistic behavior is how cruelty slowly starts feeling normal to them. Protecting their ego becomes more important than protecting another person's heart. Over time, they stop recognizing the emotional destruction they leave behind because pride blinds them to the pain they create. Many narcissists secretly believe consequences apply differently to them. They expect forgiveness without repentance, sympathy without accountability, mercy without change. They spend years creating confusion around other people while presenting themselves as the victim whenever pressure starts turning back toward them. That strategy may fool people temporarily. It does not fool God. The narcissist in your life believed they controlled the narrative completely. They thought if they manipulated enough conversations, twisted enough details, and talked long enough, the truth could stay buried forever. Some even enjoyed watching you struggle emotionally because your pain fed their sense of control. Seeing you isolated strengthened their ego. Watching you constantly defend yourself made them feel powerful. While all of this was happening, God was allowing their real character to reveal itself fully. The cracks started forming where nobody else could see yet. Peace began leaving them. Rest became difficult. Fear quietly entered their thoughts without warning. Now many of them are stepping into a storm they can no longer manage emotionally. Pressure is hitting every part of their lives at once. Financial instability, relationship problems, mental exhaustion, emotional paranoia, loss of favor, growing panic over things they once ignored confidently. Their lives are becoming a cesspool of consequences they can no longer escape. What they released toward others is beginning to contaminate their own peace emotionally, mentally. Some wake up every morning feeling heavy without understanding why. Some are terrified hidden truths may surface. Some are becoming irrational because deep inside they can feel control slipping away from them little by little. A narcissistic person can survive many things, but losing control over perception is one of the hardest experiences for them to endure. Once the image they built starts cracking, fear spreads quickly. Obsessed with controlling information and monitoring what others know, deep down, they understand something they tried avoiding for a very long time. The foundation they built their life upon was never stable. And once God begins removing protection from a prideful life, collapse can move quickly. The same person who once acted untouchable now feels trapped inside anxiety they cannot escape. The same person who enjoyed creating confusion around your life now wakes up confused themselves. Everything they sent outward is beginning to return inward. Not because you cursed them, not because you chased revenge. Their own choices opened the door for this downfall. And the most unsettling part for them is that consequences have only started arriving, because now they are becoming trapped inside the very destruction they once created for somebody else. 3. They are being trapped by their own actions. One of the most unsettling parts of divine judgment is watching people slowly become prisoners of the very darkness they once used against somebody else. Nothing traps a person faster than their own choices. The people who hurt you believed they were creating suffering for your life, but they were quietly building a trap around themselves the entire time. Every lie added another wall. Every manipulation tightened the pressure. Every jealous attack pulled them deeper into spiritual confusion they could no longer recognize clearly. Now many of them are living inside the atmosphere they created for you. The isolation they tried forcing onto you is circling back onto them. The anxiety they enjoyed causing in your life is beginning to consume their own thoughts. The instability they secretly celebrated around you is now appearing inside their own homes, relationships, finances, and emotional health. God does not always punish people by sending something new into their lives. Sometimes He simply allows them to sit inside the consequences of what they created, and suddenly the very behavior they once justified starts destroying their peace. Some cannot sleep properly anymore. Some are constantly agitated. Some are losing support from people they thought would always stand beside them. Others are terrified because secrets they buried deeply are beginning to move closer to exposure. The pressure building around them feels impossible to manage because narcissistic people survive through control. They survive by managing perception, twisting narratives, and staying ahead of accountability. But once God steps into the situation, manipulation starts failing. The mask slips. The stories stop working. People begin noticing inconsistencies, and the narcissist becomes desperate, trying to hold everything together. What makes this even heavier is that many of them were warned before things reached this point. Deep down, they knew they should stop. They knew they were crossing lines morally and emotionally. Yet pride kept convincing them they could continue without consequences. Now, the storm surrounding their lives keeps growing stronger. These people almost like being stuck in a karmic cesspool, and honestly, that image carries real weight because they cannot escape the emotional filth they created. Fear follows them. Restlessness follows them. Confusion follows them. Everything feels heavy because darkness eventually becomes exhausting to carry. Meanwhile, God is separating you from that environment completely. Some relationships are ending because heaven has already decided those people cannot go where God is taking you next. Some doors are closing because toxic individuals would continue draining your peace if they remained connected to your life. If you can feel God removing certain people, certain attachments, and certain toxic environments from around you lately, type 77 inches the comments. Because this separation is not punishment for you, it is protection. God knows some people would never stop hurting you unless He physically removed them from your path. And while they are becoming trapped inside the consequences of their own actions, something very different is happening to you. Every attack that was meant to break you has slowly been turning you into somebody stronger than you were before. 4. Everything they did only made you stronger. The people who tried to destroy you never realized they were pushing you toward transformation instead. They thought pressure would make you collapse. They thought betrayal would weaken your spirit. They thought isolation would break your confidence and leave you emotionally dependent on the same people who wounded you. But something completely different happened. The pain forced you closer to God, not closer to comfort, not closer to people, closer to God. And there is a kind of strength heaven builds inside a person when nobody else fully understands what they are carrying. A quiet strength, a disciplined strength, the kind that does not need applause because it was developed in private places where only God witnessed the struggle. Many people around you probably have no idea how much emotional restraint it took for you to survive what you went through without becoming hateful. You had every reason to become bitter. You had every reason to stop trusting people completely. You had every reason to retaliate after the humiliation, the manipulation, the rejection, and the hidden attacks that kept happening behind your back. But instead of becoming consumed by darkness, you started learning discernment. You learned how to recognize fake concern. You learned how to stop chasing approval. You learned how to stand alone without panicking. You learned how to protect your peace instead of constantly explaining yourself to people determined to misunderstand you anyway. None of those lessons came easily. They were born from heartbreak. Some nights probably felt unbearable. Some seasons drained you emotionally to the point where you questioned whether you had any strength left at all. Yet, every painful chapter was building endurance inside your spirit, little by little. The narcissists thought they were watching you fall apart. God was watching you become harder to manipulate. The people who mocked your kindness did not understand they were witnessing somebody being spiritually refined under pressure. And refinement never feels pleasant while it is happening. Fire is uncomfortable. Isolation is uncomfortable. Betrayal is uncomfortable. But brokenness handled correctly can produce wisdom many people never develop in an entire lifetime. Now look at what happened. You became more careful with your trust, more emotionally disciplined, more dependent on God than public opinion. Meanwhile, the people who spent their time attacking you remained spiritually stagnant. Their obsession with controlling others kept them from growing themselves. While you were learning endurance, they were feeding pride. While you were healing quietly, they were becoming more consumed by manipulation, jealousy, and bitterness. And the attacks that were meant to bury you ended up revealing what God had placed inside you all along: a stronger spirit, sharper discernment, greater emotional control, a deeper relationship with Him. Some of the people who once underestimated you are beginning to realize they were never fighting a weak person to begin with. They were fighting somebody God was preparing for leadership, preparing for elevation, preparing for a future far beyond the small, toxic environments that tried to hold you down. And while God continues strengthening you quietly, something far more chaotic is beginning to unfold in the lives of the people who refuse to leave you alone. Because now, the storm surrounding them is becoming impossible to ignore. 5. Now their lives feel like a storm. People who secretly carried darkness often appear comfortable before consequences arrive. They continue living normally, smiling publicly, making plans confidently, acting as though nothing they did behind closed doors will ever touch their own future. But eventually God removes His hand of protection from certain situations. And once that happens, collapse can spread fast. The people who spent years attacking you are entering a period where peace is disappearing from every direction of their lives at once. What once felt secure suddenly feels unstable. What once looked permanent suddenly feels fragile. Some are losing financial stability. Opportunities are drying up unexpectedly. Money problems are appearing out of nowhere. Careers that once looked promising are becoming stressful and uncertain. The same people who felt proud while watching you struggle are now waking up worried about their own survival. Others are watching relationships fall apart. Arguments increase. Trust disappears. Distance grows inside their homes. People they relied on emotionally are pulling away from them. Because darkness eventually contaminates everything around it. A person cannot spend years operating through manipulation, jealousy, cruelty, and hidden hatred without that poison eventually spreading into every area of life. It affects the mind. It affects emotional stability. It affects decision-making. It affects relationships. Eventually, even their own environment begins reflecting the chaos they created internally. Some of these individuals can already feel it happening. Nothing feels peaceful anymore. Their mind constantly races. Their emotions swing unpredictably. Fear keeps growing underneath the surface no matter how hard they try to hide it. Many people forget that peace is a privilege. Stability is a privilege. Favor is a privilege. Emotional clarity is a privilege. And when somebody repeatedly abuses others while ignoring every warning God sends, those privileges can begin disappearing one by one. Not because God is cruel, because eventually correction becomes necessary. Some people only learn when the comfort they worship starts collapsing around them. Now the same individuals who once laughed at your hardship are being forced to sit inside their own instability. They are discovering how exhausting chaos actually feels when it becomes personal. The storm they once released toward others is now moving directly through their own lives. And the terrifying part for them is that many of these problems are hitting simultaneously. Pressure at home, pressure financially, pressure emotionally, no real rest anywhere. A narcissistic person especially struggles under this kind of pressure because they depend heavily on control. They need to feel admired. They need to feel superior. They need to feel capable of managing how others perceive them. But storms expose weakness quickly. Once everything starts shaking at the same time, masks become harder to maintain. Emotional reactions become more unstable. Desperation becomes visible. Panic starts leaking through the cracks. The very people who once looked calm while destroying your peace are now struggling to hold their own lives together. And while all of this chaos continues building around them, another frightening development is getting closer and closer. The truth they fought so hard to hide is beginning to rise to the surface. 6. The truth is about to come out. The people who hurt you survived for a long time by hiding behind secrecy. Secrecy protected their image. Secrecy protected their lies. Secrecy protected the false version of events they carefully built around your name. As long as the full truth remained buried, they felt safe. They believed they could continue controlling perception forever. They believed nobody would ever connect the dots strongly enough to see what was really happening behind the scenes. But hidden things do not stay hidden forever once God decides exposure has become necessary. Something is changing now. Conversations are shifting. Masks are slipping. Pieces of information are surfacing in ways nobody can fully control anymore. Some of the people involved in hurting you are becoming deeply unsettled because they can feel the narrative slipping out of their hands. They are realizing they cannot manipulate every person forever. They cannot monitor every conversation forever. They cannot silence truth forever. And deep down, many of them know exactly which secrets could destroy the image they spent years protecting. Exposure rarely arrives all at once. A strange inconsistency, an old memory resurfacing, a conversation suddenly sounding different now that people are paying closer attention, someone recognizing patterns they ignored before. Little by little, darkness starts losing its covering, and some of the truths coming into the light may hurt more than expected, because not everybody who smiled around you genuinely loved you. Certain people secretly participated in the attacks while pretending to stay neutral. Others quietly encouraged confusion while protecting their public reputation carefully. That realization cuts deeply, especially when betrayal comes from people you trusted emotionally. But exposure is not cruelty. Exposure is mercy. God cannot fully move your life forward while hidden enemies remain attached to your future unnoticed. Some truths must become visible before real freedom can begin. Some people must reveal themselves clearly before God removes them permanently from your path. Many of these individuals are terrified because they sense the walls protecting their deception weakening rapidly. The narcissist feels this pressure intensely. A narcissistic person depends heavily on image management. Their sense of control depends on controlling perception. Once truth starts slipping beyond their control, panic spreads quickly. Suddenly they become defensive over small things, irritated without explanation, obsessed with monitoring what people know, what people are saying, and who might be connecting pieces together. Fear starts consuming them, because exposure threatens the identity they carefully created. Some are already scrambling privately, trying to protect themselves before the full truth surfaces. Others are desperately trying to hold relationships together that were built on manipulation from the beginning. But when God decides something hidden can no longer remain hidden, no amount of manipulation can permanently stop revelation. If you believe God is bringing hidden truth into the light, type "Truth always rises" in the comments. God is removing confusion from your life. The lies are weakening. The manipulation is losing power. The people who spent years distorting reality are slowly becoming exposed through their own behavior. And once the truth fully reaches the surface, God will begin removing every remaining toxic attachment from your path completely. 7. God is removing them from your path for good. Some people were never meant to continue into your future. No amount of praying, explaining, forgiving, or hoping could change the reality that certain individuals carried destruction into your life every time they remained connected to you. They brought confusion where God was trying to establish peace. They brought emotional exhaustion where God was trying to bring healing. They brought instability into places where heaven was trying to restore your strength quietly. Eventually, God makes a decision. God is no longer allowing toxic people to move freely through your life while damaging your spirit behind the scenes. This separation is becoming complete, not partial, not temporary. Complete. Some relationships are ending permanently. Some friendships will never return to what they once were. Certain people are being pushed farther away from your life because if they remained close, They would continue draining your peace, disturbing your spirit, and interfering with the direction God is leading you toward. Separation often feels painful before it feels peaceful, especially when you genuinely cared about people who secretly carried jealousy, manipulation, or hidden resentment toward you. Part of you may still remember the laughter, the memories, the moments that once felt real. Part of you may still wish things had unfolded differently. But wisdom eventually accepts what emotions struggle to release. Not everybody connected to you was assigned to protect you. Some people exposed wounds that still needed healing inside you. Others revealed where your boundaries were too weak. Others taught you the danger of ignoring discernment simply because you wanted to believe the best in everyone around you. Now God is closing doors you kept trying to leave emotionally cracked open, because certain individuals would never stop hurting you voluntarily. The narcissist especially struggles when access begins disappearing. Once they realize they can no longer easily control your emotions, monitor your life, manipulate your reactions, or disturb your peace, panic begins rising quickly inside them. To a narcissistic person, losing access feels like losing power, but your peace is no longer negotiable. God did not carry you through betrayal, confusion, sleepless nights, emotional warfare, and hidden attacks just to place you back inside the same toxic cycle again. A cleaner season is beginning now. Less confusion, less chaos, less emotional heaviness, more clarity, more peace, more spiritual stability. And while God is permanently removing toxic people from your path, something deeply uncomfortable is beginning to settle over the people who wounded you. For the first time in a very long time, they are beginning to feel the emotional weight of what they once put you through. 8. They are finally feeling what they did to you. For a very long time, the people who hurt you stayed emotionally disconnected from the damage they caused. They could walk away from painful conversations while you stayed awake, replaying every word in your mind. They could continue living comfortably while you carried confusion, anxiety, heartbreak, and emotional exhaustion that followed you quietly through everyday life. Your suffering felt distant to them, and that is one of the coldest realities about narcissistic behavior. When pride fully takes over a person, empathy begins disappearing. As long as they feel powerful, justified, admired, or in control, they stop thinking deeply about the emotional consequences they leave behind in somebody else's spirit. But eventually, God allows reversal. Now many of these same individuals are beginning to experience internally what they once ignored inside you. The emotional exhaustion, the restless nights. Some are waking up in the middle of the night, unable to quiet their thoughts. Others feel constantly irritated because peace has started slipping away from them emotionally. Fear keeps surfacing unexpectedly. Regret is beginning to rise during quiet moments where distractions no longer silence the truth inside them. And perhaps the hardest part for them is realizing they cannot escape themselves anymore. No performance fully works now. No distraction fully works now. No manipulation fully works now. Because once God forces a person to sit with the weight of their own behavior, the soul becomes restless. The emotional pressure they release toward your life is beginning to circle back toward them in ways they never expected. Some are starting to understand the depth of the wounds they caused only after emotional instability enters their own life personally. Others still refuse accountability outwardly, but denial cannot permanently protect a person from consequences developing internally. Many had opportunities to stop before things reached this point. They could have apologized. They could have changed. They could have chosen humility. They could have left you alone instead of continuing the attacks, the manipulation, the lies, and the hidden hostility. But pride kept driving them further. And pride always convinces people consequences are for someone else. Now, the same emotions they once dismissed inside you are becoming part of their own reality. The anxiety, the uncertainty, the emotional heaviness, the mental exhaustion. For the first time in a long time, some of these individuals are beginning to understand what it feels like to carry invisible emotional torment every day. Meanwhile, something completely different is happening in your life. God is slowly lifting the weight you carried for so long. Clarity is replacing confusion. Peace is replacing chaos. Discernment is replacing emotional blindness. And while the people who hurt you continue struggling under the consequences of their own choices, God is preparing to bring you into a season where you no longer question whether heaven saw what happened to you, because God did not bring you this far only to let darkness win in the end. 9. God did not bring you this far to let evil win. You did not survive all of this by accident. God did not carry you through betrayal, confusion, rejection, emotional warfare, sleepless nights, and hidden attacks just to abandon you at the end of the story. Even during the moments where you felt forgotten, heaven was still guiding your steps quietly. God saw every tear you hid from other people. He saw the exhaustion you carried while trying to remain strong for everyone around you. He saw the nights where your heart felt heavy from disappointment. He saw the moments you questioned yourself because of the lies spoken against you. None of it was invisible to him. And now you are entering a season where the difference between your path and the path of those who hurt you will become impossible to ignore. Not because you are perfect, not because you never made mistakes, but because your heart remained open to correction while theirs remained consumed by pride. There is a major difference between a wounded person trying to heal and a prideful person refusing to change. God can restore a wounded heart, but pride destroys people from the inside when they continue resisting truth. C.S. Lewis once wrote, "Pain insists upon being attended to. God whispers to us in our pleasures, speaks in our conscience, but shouts in our pains." And for many of the people who hurt you, the pain they are beginning to experience now is forcing them to confront truths they spent years trying to avoid. Many of the people who attacked you spent years believing they were delaying your destiny. In reality, they were only delaying their own peace. Every lie, every manipulation, every jealous attack slowly built heavier consequences around their own future. Meanwhile, God was still preparing you, preparing your discernment, preparing your strength, preparing your spirit for a cleaner, calmer, and more stable chapter of life. And perhaps the most beautiful part of all of this is knowing you no longer need to fight battles God already decided to handle himself. You no longer need to obsess over proving your innocence to people determined to misunderstand you. You no longer need to carry the emotional burden of defending yourself endlessly. Truth has a way of surviving. God has a way of revealing. And justice has a way of arriving at the exact moment pride believes it escaped permanently. The people who hurt you may continue pretending for a while externally, but internally many already know something has shifted. They can feel the weight of their own choices catching up to them. They can feel peace slipping away. They can feel control weakening. But your life is moving in a different direction now. God is leading you away from confusion, away from manipulation, away from constant emotional heaviness. A new season is opening where your spirit can finally breathe again without carrying the pressure of toxic people constantly pulling against your peace. So do not fear the separation. Do not fear the exposure. Do not fear the changes happening around you. God is removing what can no longer go where He is taking you next. And after everything you survived, one truth should remain deeply planted in your spirit. Justice may be delayed for a season, but God never forgets who suffered in silence.